Thank you so much for joining Heritage University this evening. If we have not had the pleasure to meet, my name is Melissa Rogers, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Heritage Property Management. Tonight, we are in the second class of a 7-part series. So for those of you in the audience, if you did join us for last, I should say 2 weeks ago, our first class, welcome back. If this is your first time joining us for a Heritage University class or the first time part of this series, we are so excited that you're here, and thank you for taking time out of your evening to join me. I will do my very best to make this as quick as possible and leave as much time for question and answers. Tonight, we are going to be talking about how to run an effective board meeting and working with a management company. I am going to go ahead and go through the topics of the slides this evening, and we're going to do the questions at the very end. But I want you to go ahead and feel free to put the questions in the chat box, which is going to be located, I think, for you in your upper right-hand corner. And we will take those questions as the presentation goes and hopefully answer them towards the end. So, going into the second slide, tonight's class, what are we going to learn? We're going to learn the importance of effective decision making by the board of directors. We're going to learn how to effectively run board meetings. We're going to talk about the role of a community manager and maybe working with a community association management company, very similar to Heritage. All right. Oops, I went too quickly. There we go. All right, board decision making. So where does all of this start from? So where do you have the ability and the authority as a board of directors to make decisions for the association's business? Remembering in our first class, we talked about what an association was, how it was regulated, and where you get the governance specifically from the association's governing documents. So first and foremost, you are a business, just as a quick reminder, you have the governance authority from your governing documents, and then you have a responsibility to create that prosperity and the equity within your association, okay? So now we're going to talk about, I'm going to figure this out, gosh darn it. There we go. We're going to talk about focused board meetings, or what I like to call timed board meetings. And we're going to talk about this in a couple of different ways, but boards of directors, the meetings are incredibly crucial. And I've previously talked about in other sessions, taking meeting minutes does not have to be so difficult, or intimidating for secretaries, but it is incredibly important because this is the only business record of your association's operations, okay? So thankfully, the Georgia Secretary of State has acknowledged virtual meetings as, or I should say, virtual operations as a means of conducting association business. So you're going to notice that under board meetings, the only things that are truly required are going to be the decisions made during the meeting and possibly any email decisions that were made before the meeting has taken place. And we'll talk about how to ratify board meeting minutes in future months so that you can adopt those email votes that were taken throughout the month. I'm not, again, everything that we're talking about, you definitely want to be able to take a look at your governing document specifically for your association. I didn't say this earlier, but tonight we're going to talk in kind of generality. So if there's anything that you hear that might differ from how your association operates, definitely seek first what's in your declaration and what's in your bylaws before taking a look at the general side. So presentation of possible solutions, or sometimes what we consider to be discussion, okay? And then setting of new priorities for the next meeting's agenda. This seems to be pretty, common basic knowledge, but it's very important to know that these things are required in order to be present, right? So we already talked about when there are not effective meetings or irregularities within meetings, it can be very, very difficult for associations to have cohesion from one board of directors to another. Okay, so now we're going to talk about preparing for board meetings. And we don't want this to sound, overwhelming, like board meetings have to be this grand thing. And in fact, hopefully we're going to try and establish some really good guidelines for you tonight so that you have all of the tools needed so that effective board meetings can be done in 1 to maybe 2 hours tops. Okay. So we talked about this, state statutes and legal documents, whether you're a condo association, whether you're a property owners association or a homeowners association, your governing documents are going to dictate different responsibilities and different items, okay? But think of the meeting as the end of the decision-making process rather than the beginning. Okay, I can't stress that enough. A lot of times board members utilize their board meeting as an all-inclusive, the only time that they touch base as, you know, an organization. Obviously, you're volunteers and you have things that happen in your personal lives. But when boards utilize their board meeting for all of the discussion, and don't get to the point where there's an often time to make a decision, or maybe you have to table so many topics because you've not had enough time to discuss that. This is where having these kinds of conversations and these resources ahead of time are going to really prepare you for a much more successful environment going into your next board meeting. Okay, so these are all going to be incredibly good items on the slides. If I don't get the opportunity to touch base on all of them, you are going to get a copy of everything tonight. And I'm actually even going to include sample board meeting minutes. So for those of you who have attended any heritage classes before, we like to give a lot of resources. We like to give a lot of templates. We want to make your lives as easy as possible. And we want to be able to allow you to attract volunteers to effectively operate your association when you've served your time. So the notice of the meeting should be sent to the board members based on the timeline offered in the bylaws. I oftentimes get this question, how much notice should we give as a board if we need to have a meeting? Well, that actually has to be answered by your bylaws. And just as a quick reminder, friends, your governing documents, your declaration, your architectural standards, those are found in your declaration. Those govern the association's responsibilities and rights. The bylaws of the association actually govern the board of directors, maybe some of how your annual meeting is supposed to be done, and if there are any committees for your association. So make sure you know which document to reference so that you can get answers to these questions should you have them. Okay. So what is an agenda? I know this too might seem like a really basic question, but this is going to be very helpful. An agenda is more than just an announcement of an order of business. It's going to set the tone for the entire meeting. And remember, in the very beginning, I talked about I'm a huge proponent for timed agendas. We're going to talk about this in more detail, but timed agendas are very, very helpful in being able to effectively get through a lot of association business. There are varying sizes of associations. There are varying projects that you're going to have. Some things are going to require discussion. You might have a lot of committees and everybody brings a report. We want to be able to effectively set the tone for your homeowners to be able to know what they can expect if you allow any type of open meeting sessions, or you as the board members, as the officers of the association, can effectively run, okay? And so we're going to talk about the presiding officer that you're going to see in here. You're going to see that reference to me talking about discussion versus decision, okay? And a lot of questions come up about what should board meeting minutes really entail? Well, let's take a look at that. Board meeting minutes and effective flow have a lot of detail. So we're going to talk about really quickly before we get into the board meeting minute details. Things that are going to be really helpful when preparing your agenda or even preparing for the board meeting itself. Have the meeting minutes from the last meeting, okay? Treasurer's report or finance report. Again, I referenced if there's any committee recommendations from any active organizations that you have within the community, let's go ahead and bring those to the table and make sure that they feel like they are going to be heard as well. If you do partner with a management company, a management report is absolutely helpful. And then any other items or proposals. A lot of times when we talked about the discussion part, a lot of times your community manager may have gotten 3 or 4 bids for, let's just say, a roof project. Instead of sending them to you one by one via email or via Vanica once they're up, we want to sometimes be able to effectively utilize this time period to present the analysis so that you as a board can either say, we're going to table this for further discussion, or we can finally make a decision because we have all of the information needed at that particular time. Plus we've got quorum. Quorum is going to be determined by your bylaws as well. We're going to see that here in upcoming slides. Okay. A lot of homeowners and volunteers in our previous class, we had mentioned when volunteers are on the board, often for the first time, they don't even realize how much actually goes into being a board member until a couple of months into it. They thought they had a really good idea of what was happening in their community, and then you know, they find that actually they were pretty misguided in that, and they learn a lot of really good things and value from serving on their community. So parliamentary procedure is how you absolutely run board meetings. I think just about every organization does this. Even though you are a not-for-profit, it is still incredibly important that the association's business is detailed appropriately. Okay, so you're going to hear terms, almost like glossary terms on this slide right here. Quorum, making a motion, just so that you're aware. If you did not know this, the president, who should be the presiding officer over every board meeting, not the association's manager, not the secretary, okay? The presiding officer really should be the president for every board meeting, okay? And so because they preside over the board meeting and they're oftentimes orating the flow of the agenda, they cannot make a motion to be able to pass something. So please know that it is up to the other officers or board members to first make the motion for it to allow to be seconded. Okay, so you're going to see that on here. Majority, that's going to be the voting that might need to be had based on your bylaws on how you need to effectively come to a decision. Some bylaws require 100%. Some don't even have majority. Some have plurality, which I don't often see this, and I don't know how many others you might. There are some really good snowflake declaration and bylaws out there, so you never know. But seconding a motion, like I said, so another officer says, I make a motion to approve ABC landscaping for contract period 2022 to 2023. That's the motion. Motion's on the floor. We now need to have another person say, I second the motion. We can now either have discussion or we raise the vote to say all in favor, those opposed, and then the motion rests, however it comes, okay? So amending a motion, okay, to change the motion, remember, I just said right there, I make a motion to approve ABC landscaping. That whole motion actually needs to be listed on your meeting minutes, okay? That whole motion, all those words, they need to be on there because that amending a motion, comes into play. If now we have to amend it to say we're approving it or we're going to table it, or let's just say ABC Landscaping has altered their proposal, so we need to revisit. That's an amendment to that particular motion, okay? And we need to be able to have that opportunity. Then we have table a motion for the same reasons, like I said. If there needs to be further discussion, if there is no decision that's going to be made, you must table the motion, okay? And then abstentions. Those are those that, due to conflict of interests or anything like that, are abstaining from their vote being considered. When you have abstentions, you need to pay very close attention to what your quorum requirements are in order to pass a board vote into existence, okay? All right, that was a lot on that slide. Basic principles of meeting conduct. Tonight, we're actually going to also provide in your goodie bag of templates and resources, we're also going to provide to you Robert's Rules of Order summary and a board code of ethics. All of these things are great resources to put in your brand new board binder or for your brand new committees. This just shows that you want to make sure that your fellow neighbors and friends potentially know exactly how to put their business hat on and when they can take their business hat off, okay? So again, as we talked about, parliamentary procedure is the way in which you're going to operate your association. And then we want to absolutely make sure that even if there is opposing conversation, that it is done so in a respectful, calm manner, okay? You know, it's no surprise right now that a lot of civility conversations are coming into question. And so we just ask that everybody understand that while we get that you're neighbors and you might not agree with all of the decisions that are made, once a decision is made, you as a board speak in one voice, and it's incredibly important to be united when you communicate to your homeowners, okay? And we're going to talk about some additional things regarding what can and cannot be listed on the meeting minutes in upcoming slides. So I have a feeling we might have a couple of questions related to, do I have to put somebody's name if they voted no? And the answer is no, you don't. Okay, so with this being said, what if a homeowner or resident asks to speak at a board meeting because they want to talk about the fence that's going to be falling down that we need to repair? Great question. Take a look at your governing documents. Some of your association documents allow for open board meetings, meaning that the board can have a meeting but have a resident forum at the beginning or the end. Some require that you have quarterly community meetings, which generally community meetings are going to be what is considered a town hall style, where it's a conversation of question and answer and not as much decision or motions on the floor, okay? So here we're talking about if you have a homeowner that's got a question, how would you go about handling that? It's also a great recommendation that your frequency of board meeting schedules is outlined in your bylaws. Even if as associations, your bylaws say as a board of directors, you only have to meet once a year, we recommend publishing that. That way your homeowners have a healthy expectation. They don't feel as if, oh, well, I came from an association where my board met monthly, but now this board doesn't meet at all. There must be something wrong with the board. No, there's nothing wrong with the board. They're well within their operation right. It's just that declarations and bylaws can oftentimes be different. And then also the implementation of the operation from the board members may be different. Maybe that board that met monthly really had quarterly requirements, yet they decided to meet on a more frequent basis. Just understand that that is something that is incredibly helpful, that communication to your homeowners. And I'm a proponent a little bit more to have resident forum at the end of board meetings, simply because I'd love for you to be in listen only mode and take, be a part of the conversation or the decision making that's had, because oftentimes we might answer your questions related to that specific topic. But submitting questions prior to the meeting in an email is a fantastic way. If you're not able to physically be in attendance, let's say there is no resident forum for your board meetings, okay? Oftentimes there doesn't have to be one unless your declaration or your bylaws state that, okay? And so if you don't have that resident forum, then allow that conversation, whether that's through Vanica and we receive those, messages to management, whatever that might be, we can address those in the board meeting session and then be able to get back to you if a directive has been offered from your question, or to offer further clarity on a particular topic if it was discussed in the board meeting. Okay, so we're going back to the role of the presiding officer. The presiding officer runs the board meeting. It's often always the president. If it is not the president, the board meeting minutes must state that it is the VP or the secretary running instead of the president due to their absence. Okay, the presiding officer's duty is they that board meeting. They're going to run through that board meeting, and they're going to make sure, especially if it's timed, they're going to go ahead and make sure that it is gone through in the appropriate time period, and they may even have to cut some people off, not to be disrespectful, but to keep within the time period that's necessary. Okay. As I opened this particular session, we talked about running effective timed board meetings, and that I really like timed agendas. If you get into this practice of having all of those resources, you start to create those board meeting minutes, you're communicating out to the ownership by submitting your record, your board meeting should be incredibly effective within that 1 to 2 hour period. If your board meetings are going over 2 hours, please come and talk to your community manager. Please feel free to email me. I'd love to be able to help you on that if you are not already a Heritage client. Most people tune out after 2 hours of anything, whether it's a meeting, whether it's a movie. Our attention spans are only so much. So if there's a lot of content, we might want to revisit certain aspects of discussion. So these are all things that we can put in consideration. Oh, now I've got control. Thank you. Okay, so executive sessions. Let's talk about this, because earlier we talked about what should be in the meeting, what should not be in the meeting. I feel like maybe we have missed that slide too, potentially, but that might be me. In the minutes, there's a difference between what should be considered executive and what should be considered open session. Okay. And so I want to point out that the very first block right here that talks about the sunshine law does not apply to the state of Georgia. For all of you who have ever served in a separate state, the state of Georgia does not acknowledge any of the sunshine laws or rules. For those of you that are from Florida, have ever practiced or have served in Florida, board members cannot meet for more than, I believe it's 3 people. Individuals that serve on the board cannot be in the same room with more than 2 people, or else it's constituted as a board meeting. Okay, we do not have that application here in the state of Georgia. I also want to let you know that under Robert's Rules of Order, all of community association votes are of secret ballot. That means you do not need to disclose, unless your bylaws or declaration state otherwise. You do not need to disclose the name of the individuals voting and if they voted for or against a particular motion. On your meeting agenda, you're going to have the persons present, the persons absent. The record is going to state whether or not there was quorum based on those persons present at the meeting. And then the authority or the subsequent follow is going to go. The motion is made for ABC Landscaping. All in favor? Passed. Okay. The motion for CBD Roofing? Denied. Okay. We do not need to list who approved it and who denied it. I think I now just repeated myself. I'm sure all of you are saying, yes, Melissa, we hear you, we understand. Thank you for clarifying. It is my pleasure. I do want to let all of you in the audience know, Luter, Larkin, and Hunter, one of their awesome litigation attorneys, Cindy Hodge, she is going to be teaching a class for all of you. She's already done this fantastic class for our community managers earlier this year. But she is going to be teaching all of you in the month of October everything you need to know about Robert's Rules of Order and a way better overview of how to effectively run board meetings. Okay, so she's going to give you all these great resources and some great additional things that, of course, I'm not an attorney, so I don't even try to play to be one on that. So she can offer a much different perspective than we as community association managers. So just know that. So let's talk about the different things that need to be isolated between open meeting minutes, meaning the association homeowners are allowed to see the official open meeting minutes of the association. The association homeowners are not allowed to see the executive session of the meeting minutes. So if you are a board of directors that puts their executive session meeting minutes on their open meeting minutes and publishes that to the association, please don't. Please just make those two separate documents. I know you think, or it's been my experience when I've talked to some boards that do have that executive showing to their homeowners that they feel that they are being open and honest. You're really not doing yourself any service, because what you could actually, in certain circumstances, be compromising homeowners' personal information, and we'll talk about why. As you can see, executive session meeting minutes should only be 3 things. So it really shouldn't be, gosh, I don't know which should go where. It's really only 3 things. Personnel issues. Okay, let's talk about this. If you've got a community association manager, if you've got a vendor, personnel issues, if they are employees of the association, the management contract, okay? If you are employed with Heritage Property Management and you feel like you would like to have a confident conversation, you can excuse your community manager even from executive session. I don't recommend it, but you can. You have the authority to do that, okay? The second thing, contract negotiations and discussions. We know that there are a lot of board members who actually put their contract negotiations and discussions in open board meeting session. You actually have the potential to defame that particular vendor. You have the ability to show their way of doing operations to another vendor or a direct competitor. And we're really just trying to do association business. Nobody's intentionally trying to do things like that. We do genuinely think that at the basis, being open to the neighborhood means that we're doing the best thing for transparency. If that was the case, we wouldn't need a board of directors, okay? So it's incredibly important to know when to put on that business hat that I talked about. So contract negotiations and discussions absolutely always should be in executive session. Now, when you go to make that vote, ABC landscaping, you can put in there discussion in executive session. Who has the right to see executive session? Board members. That's all who needs to see what's happening, because again, the membership elected you to do all of the business of the association's operations. If they don't like what you decided, they get to run for the board, or they get to call a special meeting and overturn the board. Okay, that very rarely happens, but there are things and provisions within the governing documents to allow for that. The last thing, which should be blaringly obvious, is lawsuits and other legal matters. I want to say that other legal matters include ARC request denials, as well as any violations. Okay, if you have any fining authority, or if you have violation, non-compliance issues within your community, if you have a hearing process, let's say outside structure was not approved and the homeowner filed to have a meeting or to have a hearing with the board, That happens in executive session, okay? That does not happen in open meeting, okay? Violations, the same thing. If we have to move forward with filing suit or fining, it needs to be notated that that next step is transpiring. Because we're talking of sensitive nature of people's, individual maybe accounts or finances, that is protected under the Fair Debt Collection Act. We cannot have any people's names or direct tied addresses in open session about any delinquencies, violations, or anything of a negative discourse, okay? So anything related to those items must be notated in executive session. So this is the exact reason why I recommend, why it's a best business practice, and most association attorneys will recommend you create two separate meeting minutes. One is the open session and one is the executive session, okay? Oops, see if I can switch. There we go. All right. Yay, we didn't miss this slide. Okay. Here is the recording in step with the way that I talked about the executive session. Here is the recording adoption of your meeting minutes. Okay, these are the things that this is the guts, the meats and potatoes that need to be in your meeting minutes in order for them to be effective. Okay, so I think we've hammered home enough that decisions only and some discussion. And what I mean by some discussion, ABC Landscaping is going to be tabled so that the association, or not even tabled, ABC Landscaping is meeting with the board of directors to interview. That's a discussion, period. You want that to be in there because you're making a delineation that in an executive session, you're probably doing contract negotiations, okay? That's perfectly acceptable. Meeting minutes should only reflect what is done, not what is said. If you are recording your meeting minutes with a tape recorder, if you are recording your board meeting minutes virtually, I am here to tell you, please get your association's attorney's opinion on that matter. What we are talking about tonight is the official record of the association. If you take meeting minutes and also have a recorded session of that meeting, both of those documents can be challenged in court because which one's the official one? If meeting minutes are the requirement, but you have the recording, which one? They might get knocked out. So always seek your association's attorney on this. If you are a heritage partner, it is a heritage requirement. There are no recorded meetings as it relates to annual meetings or to board meetings. This is meant for your provision to work within your ramifications, and it is a best business practice, especially with this. If you do record your meeting minutes so that you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to come back and write them all out because you're doing a complete, shorthand recap of the discussion, you're also taking your meeting minutes incorrectly. But if you do record your meetings so that you can come back and take meeting minutes, what you need to do is you need to destroy that recording, and you need to destroy that recording from anyone who has it, okay? Only the official record should be considered as the meeting minutes. Furthermore, the meeting minutes must be approved at the next, that your meeting minutes that you're doing this month are only approved next month, in the next month's meeting, or in the next time that you meet. I know that there are conversations oftentimes about annual meeting minutes because you only meet once a year. So when you approve the last year's annual meeting minutes, you're not going to get them to the next year. Some associations do practice that, and they are well within their right to do that. There are some associations that the board meets and unanimously votes to approve and passes that out to, or doesn't approve, they essentially approve to send out a draft. meaning that they acknowledge that the vote is not going to be until the next year, but that they release the drafted version to the association so that you can see what is going to be approved. So there are ways that you can go about putting out the description. You just need to make sure that the association knows that it's not actual official record until it's approved at the next meeting. And if I said anything that confused you there, which I think I could have, I apologize. Hopefully this slide will clear it all up for you. We talked in the last meeting or the last segment about the different roles of the board members and the officer positions. And there was one role that we said the president could not take. Okay, what's that? I wish I could see hands in the audience. The president cannot be the secretary. Those are two distinct positions, officer positions of the association. Now, the president can oftentimes be the treasurer too. The vice president may also be the secretary. That's no problem. But the president and the secretary cannot be maintained by the same individual. I'm going to put an asterisk there because there are a lot of boards probably that operate on one officer. Definitely seek your community manager and your community association attorney on the best practices on how to operate in those circumstances. You're going to need to do a call for volunteers. There's a lot of things that you can do in order to elicit that volunteer effort so it's not just one person. So definitely, if that's something that you see within your community, please work with your association's attorney on everything so that hopefully we can help you get some new volunteers on the board. Okay. So these are very, very good things. You'll see the second to last portion I talked about earlier in this meeting. Okay, you need to have the exact wording in there. I know a lot of people, especially when you do email votes, a lot of people just say, hey, here's the proposal. I'm going to go ahead and get the board to send this out. Hey guys, we need your approval for ABC landscaping. Yeah, approved. Yes, yes. This is all in email, right? That's great. Do me a favor. Make sure when you make a motion, okay, remember, the board president cannot make that motion. Make sure when you make that motion in email, you take any discussion that you've had previous from it and you start a new email chain. Okay? The person needs to make a motion. There needs to be a second in the email. There needs to be any, communication about it. And then that's the record. Your community association manager has to reference that email transaction, or you, the board of directors, must reference that email decision and be able to capture it for the record of the association. Okay, so this is why it's so incredibly important to also not include discussion or full-length transcription when you're doing your board meeting minutes. It should only be short discussion or maybe some type of conversation about a future action. We gave a directive to have our property manager get 3 bids for this upcoming work. That's the discussion, okay? It's not it doesn't require a motion, but we do want to have it listed. And then you only put the motion and whether it was approved or denied. Very, very clear on that, okay? Now we are about to move on. I think I've hammered home enough about board meetings. And again, Cindy Hodge, who is a fantastic attorney, is going to do a much better job talking about that and hopefully helping to fill in some of those gaps. Or if nothing less, she's going to reiterate a lot of the same things, and she's going to talk to you from an attorney's perspective when she has to preside over meetings because boards have so much dysfunction. And what she sees as a litigation attorney when she goes to court and an association loses because they don't have appropriate record of the association. Everything that we do as community association managers, we know our limits. board members. We know we're not attorneys and we know we can't make decisions. But a lot of times when we as community managers are coming to you with strong recommendations, please take heed to those. When we make the recommendation that you now need to get an attorney's opinion, we're not doing that frivolously. We're doing that not so that you have to spend money, not so that it has to become a discussion. We're doing that because we recognize our ability to give that best business practice now needs to go to the legal term, and you might need to be protected in certain circumstances. So, okay. Now we're going to talk about the roles and responsibilities of a manager. And friends, we're not going to be talking about heritage tonight. We're going to be talking about a manager and management company styles, okay? We're not going to be talking about specific service offerings. We want you to get a good bearing about what the responsibilities and the delineations are, especially for my self-managed friends that are in the audience, okay? So, community managers do the following. We implement the board decision and directives. We don't make any decisions. If this is the first time you are hearing that, community managers do not make any decisions. However, board members, if you are new to volunteering and you see that your manager is starting to do certain functions that you're like, hey, shouldn't that be the board? There's more than likely a resolution that gives the authority from the board to the manager to be able to process those violation charges. Okay, a lot of times there's policies that go behind the scenes. Maybe your community has a $25 threshold waiving. You know, maybe you allow for a waiving of the first time that a homeowner's been late. That doesn't always have to go to the vote of the board if that is a universal applied to every homeowner directive that can be written in a resolution. So you can absolutely appropriately offer and dispense responsibility appropriately. There just need to be resolutions in place that track that. Kind of like executive meeting minutes of the board. I mean, that's kind of very similar to it. Okay. We administer services. We fulfill the terms of our management agreement, which just like for you, your declaration and your bylaws are your Bible. Our management agreement is our Bible. And I hate to use that reference, but that's about the best way that I can say it. Okay. So we also provide training and leadership for inexperienced board members. I say we say that for experienced board members alike. One of the things that I think is incredibly crucial, you are volunteers and you are held to the same standard that I am. And I'm a licensed professional. Specifically, this is what I breathe, eat, and sleep. You have full-time jobs, families, other relationships, and you're doing this out of the kindness of your heart. You're probably also not getting compensated for it. So being able to be with a strong management company that can provide you not just operational services, but we're oftentimes your therapist. We oftentimes are a kindergarten teacher for some of your homeowners, you know, and we're your biggest advocate. So if you are considering or currently partnering with us, you know, it's really important to hear this piece that we are so dedicated to making sure you have the best foot forward. And so I appreciate all of you that take time to be a part of circumstances and educational opportunities that provide hopefully a capability of future volunteers in your path. Okay. So a manager's authority, just like I talked about, it comes from the management contract, okay? We still have to use your governing documents as the guidelines, because remember, we help effectively administratively operate your business, right? So we kind of fact check you a little bit. Okay, this is a great policy that you have in place. I'm just going to double check that it's well within the rights. It is unfortunate that that is something that we have to do. Some board members, they've got such great intentions and maybe not know all of the dynamics about the legal adoption of amendments or doing resolutions, so to speak. And so they might make a rule that they don't have the actual authority to do. And that's okay once we find it and rectify it, okay? you know, it's incredibly crucial that you understand your governing documents. And if for whatever reason you don't, get with an association attorney. Have them help you kind of understand, maybe a provision that seems like gobbledygook to you. Not everything makes sense, and that's okay. Okay. So now we're going to, oops, did I miss the one? No, I did. Now we're going to talk about the types of community management, okay? So there's 3 different types. And I'm not saying accounting plus and full service for anybody that knows our service levels. We're not talking about service levels. We're talking about different types of community association management. Okay. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the volunteer self-managed. Again, I tip my hat to you. Okay. It is a lot of work. Oftentimes, self-managed volunteers, they have to do all the closing letters. They have to do all of the financials and do their bank reconciliations and have to send the letters and walk the community and make sure that vendors are being scheduled for work that needs to be done. They're the ones that are having to file a lien on a property if there is a delinquency. All of the things that you might be accustomed to Heritage assisting you with, for those that are volunteer or self-managed, they are responsible for doing everything. And for some people, it's incredibly rewarding, and they may have a fantastic, I know some excellent large-scale associations that are actually by our office that have been self-managed for years and are highly effective because they have homeowners that are invested, and when they purchase their property in that association, they recognized the value of how the community's operations were. So the unfortunate reality is that there are also self-managed associations that are like, this is for the birds. We have got to get professional management. I think my marriage is in trouble because I cannot spend another minute doing association business. And I'm not being facetious. These are things that I hear when I talk to some of our clients or potential clients. And, I think this is one of the reasons why, as a company, we're so sensitive to those that are self-managed, because we know you have an uphill battle, but most of you do it with grace and with ease. And when you come into professional management from self-management, we are not going to overturn all of the good work that you've done. We are going to perpetuate it. We're going to fact check you like I talked about earlier. We're going to make sure you're operating within your boundaries. We're going to provide now a lot of that support and resource. We're going to be that third-party independent person that's going to talk to your homeowner so that they're not coming to your front door at 7 o'clock at night or stopping you at the grocery store while you're checking out, making sure that the fence on Post Road is replaced. There are some values in this trade-off. And we also want to remind everybody too that the contracts that you have with vendors are in the association's name, okay? Some of you might be under declarant developer control. Those are still in the association's name. So if there's any, misunderstanding about that, you are entitled to keep the same vendors that are working well with you if you onboard professional community management, okay? So now we're going to talk about the association employed. And this might sound confusing, but actually it's not. Let's say, for example, you are a condominium association and you've got, 200 townhomes or 200 units within the association, and you've got maybe an office building or a spare unit. Maybe you have an association-owned clubhouse or an association-owned unit that the association employee can work out of. Sometimes an association employee is a board member. There are association documents that do allow, sometimes it's very, very rare, but we have seen where some declarations allow for, and bylaws allow for, a board member to be compensated for their administrative actions for the association. very much so in the same way that the declaration or the bylaws gives the authority for the board of directors to enter into a management agreement. We have that same ability when the board, aka the association, employs someone to run their business. Not a management company, an individual employed by the board, okay? Here in the state of Georgia, you do not require a license like I do, right? I manage, as a community manager, if we manage more than one association, we must be licensed by the Georgia Real Estate Commission, okay? Our state is one of very few in the United States that requires this additional licensure. There are also some additional international and national designations that you might see, PCANs, AMSs, those types of things. That is not a requirement. In the state of Georgia, having the CAM after your name is a requirement. Now, there are some that also have a Georgia real estate license as a salesperson or an associate broker. Those persons are also qualified to manage more than one association. However, when you're dealing with an association employee, that is one person overseeing one association, they don't require a business license by GREC, okay, or the Georgia Real Estate Commission. So just make that distinction. The other thing is if you do have a license by the Real Estate Commission and you manage effectively only one association, you must put your license in an active status. It's a real interesting, fun thing. And we have very interesting and very unique licensure and accreditation rules. So I point these out specifically because a lot of board members like to save money by employing people maybe part-time to help with the administrative paperwork. Sometimes it might be a board member, like I said, or sometimes they do have a full-time dedicated manager that manages their association, and it's the only one. That keeps all that in line. And if you have one person that's running your association, that can be very cost effective for the association because you're getting that individualized attention, and they're not going to be displaced with maybe a portfolio like some of our portfolio managers who have to do a much higher level of management, I should say a much more macro as opposed to micro level where we're dealing with certain things on the surface. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about working with a management company. So now we're going to be talking about things as if I were a management company, which, we are. Okay. So very much so what we just talked about, we now get to help alleviate, we get to play the role of the HR department for you. We get to play the role of the customer service center, of the violations correspondent and modification controller. We get to be the liaison between the homeowners and the board of directors. We get to provide consistent operations and suggestions and best business practices for the board of directors. And most always, community association management companies have a digital informational technology system that allows for not only the hard records to be stored, but all of your records to be stored digitally. And a lot of the benefits that working with a management company versus an individual is that most management companies offer more than one way to make a payment. And let's face it, the most important thing about community association management is getting the money from the homeowners, because that's the only way that you can move forward with either paying the maintenance responsibilities or some of the amenities that you might have for the association. So just keeping some of those things in context: self-managed, association employed, and then working with a management company. Those are the three types of community association management options that you have for your association, okay? Now let's talk about what the management contract should look like. The next 2 slides, and then we're going to be finished. Next 2 slides are going to cover what are the things, you know, if you're doing an RFP for management, maybe you're entertaining it for the first time, or maybe you're at the 10-year mark and you have to do some due diligence and bid out contracts. I want to make sure that everybody watching this understands that you, board, have a fiduciary responsibility. I know it's a big F word. You have that responsibility for all of your contracts, and that does include the management agreement. While we want to continue to earn your business year over year, we as managers don't get shaky when you say you're going out to bid. That's not a very threatening thing to us, because oftentimes that might actually be something that is good for the association by showing that transparency that yes, we did bid out Heritage and they are still the best service provider, right? Or, hey, we were with ABC Management Company. We went out to bid with them. We recognized they were not the best provider, and that's why we made our decision to go to Heritage. So making sure that now, once you're getting to that management contract phase, you have to specify what the authorities and duties of that individual or the agent is going to be. The agent, whether it be the management company or the individual person, okay? Establish clear chain of command, provide for the manager's compensation and termination. Oftentimes you see that as the management fee, okay? Or if you do have a dedicated on-site team of people or person, you might see their personnel charges in your operating budget. So make sure that those are clearly defined in the contract as well. It must be signed by an authorized representative of both companies. An authorized representative is the president, secretary, okay? If the president and the treasurer want to do it too, that's great. But if only one can sign, the president or the secretary are the representatives to truly sign contracts, okay? Next slide, and then we are going to be wrapping up. These are some of the additional typical provisions that you want to take a look at. Indemnification. What's the term? Is there a termination clause in there? What are some other items as it relates to insurance or other ancillary costs that might be part of additional business services like postage, staples, envelopes, those types of things? It's incredibly important that you take a look at that. It's also incredibly important that you are comparing the same charges and scopes of service when you're looking at management contracts, okay? And I alluded to this earlier when we were talking about service level. We've got accounting services, okay? Accounting services is where we do the financials and we do the customer service aspect. The board is still responsible for all vendor management. We don't do anything with modification requests. We don't do anything with ARCs or violations. That's still board controlled, okay? A lot of self-managed associations like to dip their toe in the water with an accounting contract because it allows them to still have that full grasp on things. There's what we call a full service where we do all of the accounting provisions, and then there's also on-site inspections, possibly community manager attendance at your meetings, vendor management, ARC and violation compliance communication. That's considered a full service contract. And then there are those that have dedicated on-site personnel staff, okay? That's still a full service contract, but they may have one or more individuals that only work for their association. And then again, as I alluded to, those come also with the salary of that individual as well as any management fees. So those are the typical provisions. This was our class. We thank you so very much for staying with us during the technical difficulties. I thought that the content for the class was excellent. So as there are any questions, I'm going to go ahead and get those queued up. We are at our time, so for those of you that cannot stay with us for the question and answer session, because I did go over, I do apologize. You will be able to see all of the questions and answers when we have this available for you on replay. But for those of you that can stick around, we're getting the questions queued up right now, and hopefully I did enough speaking that most of you won't have very many questions, and that you're going to take advantage of all of the great resources that we're going to provide along with a copy of this presentation. If you did not have a copy or did not join us in last class, the first session, we're also going to give you a set of terms, like glossary terms, essentially. If you're a brand new board member, or if you're considering being a board member and you're watching this and I'm speaking a different language, we want to make sure that you have the corresponding information. A lot of those glossary terms are also going to be identified for you in your declaration. So make sure you take a look at that, even in your bylaws as well. So if you've ever got questions, there's always going to be those definitions in your documents. So make sure you take a look at those. It looks like I've got a question starting with, can a husband and a wife serve on the board together? That is a really good question, and it is truly going to depend on what your bylaws state. I have seen some that absolutely do allow that. Most that I have seen do not. It only truly states one representative from each household. But again, absolutely, there are some association documents that do state that. So if that is something specific to your association, I would definitely reference your declaration and your bylaws, and possibly talk to your association's attorney if there's any question about that. Okay, so we do have an important announcement. Okay, Microsoft has acknowledged an issue with Teams where users who have joined anonymously are not able to use the question and answer features in live events. If anybody watching tonight was unable to access the Q&A, please let them know and they will receive a feedback email this evening. They can submit their questions using the form that we will provide. Okay, so we're going to provide you a form in the resource email that we send after this. So again, on behalf of Heritage and Heritage University, we do apologize for all the technical difficulties. This was truly a Microsoft Teams issue. And so it looks from this special announcement that some of the features and the functionality of being able to participate this evening was potentially restricted. For that, we sincerely apologize. Again, as I just stated, we are going to offer resources from tonight's session that's going to include a copy of this. I apologize in advance for having to watch it all over again, but for those of you that would like to have the replay, that's going to be available for you. But then all the resources that I talked about tonight, plus a great email just to get some feedback from you, that's going to be coming shortly following, maybe tomorrow or early next week following this presentation. So from the questions that we did get, I hope I answered those for you. We did cover a lot of detail, so thank you again for all of you that are here, that are along this journey in the second series. Our third part series is going to be, I think, in 2 weeks from now. No, 4 weeks from now. In 2 weeks from now, we're going to have our treasurer's training class. As we ramp up for budget preparations, as we ramp up for budget season. Our managers actually met yesterday. We had so much fun in our offices. This was the first time that a lot of us were together in totality for, since the shutdown. So it was really nice. We had budget buddies where all of our managers were paired together, some with senior level management, and we went through all of your association's budgets, and we're going to give you our professional recommendation for you, hopefully here within the month of August. So 'Tis the season. So we're going to have our Vice President of Accounting, Sharon Moschel. She's going to be giving a fantastic treasurer's training class to get you prepared and set up for success, especially this is your first budget season as a board member or a volunteer. So Sharon's going to be joining us in 2 weeks. And then the 2 weeks following that, I will do the next series, which I believe is going to be all about association rules. So thank you so much for participating tonight. We apologize sincerely for the technical difficulties. Hopefully that made you feel a little bit more human. I know it did for me. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in the audience again very soon.